Welcome to Concentrated Wisdom, where we take a deep dive into a single topic each episode and really pull out all the interesting stuff
Yeah, so it's like,
to give you, our listener,
Yeah.
sort of a shortcut to being well-informed.
yeah. Mhm.
Today, we're tackling something that's probably on everyone's mind, at least a little bit these days. How to reclaim your focus in a world that's constantly vying for your attention. We've got research papers, a really interesting personal experiment
Yeah.
all laid out in front of us, so let's dive in.
Sounds good.
The first thing that jumped out at me from all of this material is the idea of the dopamine trap.
Yeah.
You know, have you ever noticed how satisfying it feels to clear out a bunch of notifications
Oh, yeah.
or just kind of endlessly scroll through social media?
It's funny because it's like, it's not actually satisfying, right?
No.
It's just like this quick hit,
Right.
and then you're like, oh, I need more.
Exactly. And it turns out that that feeling, that like sort of instant gratification, is tied to dopamine,
Dopamine.
Yeah. which is the feel-good neurotransmitter in our brains, right?
Exactly. So every time you do something that gives you a little jolt of pleasure, your brain's like, ooh, do that again. That was nice. And that's basically what's happening with these distractions, right?
So like we're literally training our brains to seek out these distractions.
Yeah.
Just like, a lab rat pressing a button for a treat.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah.
Especially because it makes it that much harder to focus on things that require, actual
Sustained effort. Yeah.
sustained effort, yeah. Like a work or a hobby
Yeah.
or just a conversation.
Right, because those things don't give you that same instant dopamine hit, right? So your brain's always looking for that quicker, easier fix.
It's like our brains are getting rewired for instant gratification.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the authors in the material we're looking at today decided to kind of fight back against this with a really interesting experiment.
Yeah, this is the boredom experiment, right?
Yes, the boredom experiment. So can you tell us about this? What did they actually do?
So they deliberately subjected themselves to super boring activities. Like, think reading pages and pages of terms and conditions,
Nope.
or like counting the digits in pi, stuff that most of us would just avoid at all costs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can barely read a short email, let alone pages of terms and conditions.
Right. But the amazing thing is,
What happened?
their attention span actually improved.
What, seriously?
Yeah, and they also reported, like, a surge in their creativity.
So basically, by choosing to be bored, they somehow made their brains better at focusing and coming up with new ideas.
Exactly.
I mean, that sounds almost too good to be true.
I know. But there's actually some science to back this up, right?
Okay, let's hear.
So boredom, it turns out, it's not just the absence of stimulation. It's actually a state where our brains can kind of wander freely.
Like just daydream.
Yeah, kind of. And when that happens, we're tapping into something called the default mode network.
Okay, now we're getting a little technical.
I know, but it's actually pretty fascinating.
So what is this default mode network?
Basically, it's a network of different regions in your brain,
Okay.
and it becomes active when you're not focused on a specific task.
Okay.
So when your mind is just wandering, that's when the default mode network is doing its thing.
So like when you're in the shower or taking a walk and suddenly an idea pops into your head,
Yeah,
that's the default mode network in action.
exactly. And the boredom experiment kind of shows how powerful this network can be. By choosing to be bored, they basically gave their brains the space to tap into this default mode network.
Interesting. So maybe we don't always need to be doing something,
Right. Maybe sometimes we need to just let our minds wander a bit and
Right.
see what comes up.
Okay, I'm starting to get this. But, even if we accept that boredom can be good for us,
Yeah.
how does this all relate to like our everyday lives in a world that's, constantly bombarding us with information and distractions?
I think that's where the research on attention spans comes in.
Okay. Yeah, I remember seeing that in the material.
It turns out our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. Some studies show that with all the digital distractions around us, we can only focus on something for like 40 seconds.
40 seconds. That's barely any time at all.
I know. It's kind of scary.
No wonder I feel like I can't get anything done.
Exactly.
It's like I start working on something and then ding, notification, and I'm gone.
And then you're down a rabbit hole for like an hour.
Yeah. So it's not just me being like lazy or undisciplined.
Yeah.
It's like my brain is actually being rewired to have a short attention span.
Yeah, it's a biological response to all this overstimulation.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel a little better,
Okay.
at least. But it still doesn't solve the problem, right? Like, how do we actually get our focus back?
Well, one interesting concept that came up in the material was this idea of scatter focus.
Scatter focus.
Yeah, have you heard of that?
I don't think so.
So it's kind of the opposite of like laser focus.
Okay.
Instead of forcing yourself to concentrate on one thing, you intentionally let your mind wander.
So, like daydreaming.
It's kind of like daydreaming, but with a purpose, you know?
Okay, I'm intrigued. So, how does scatter focus actually work? And how does it help us reclaim our attention?
Well, when you let your mind wander, you're actually tapping into that default mode network we were talking about earlier.
Right, the one that gets activated when we're bored.
Exactly. And when that happens, it can trigger something called perspective bias.
Perspective bias, that's a new one.
Basically, it's our brain's natural tendency to think about the future. And when we do that, we start to explore possibilities, make connections, and come up with new ideas.
So it's like we're using our imagination to solve problems and come up with creative solutions.
Exactly. And it makes sense if you think about it. When we're hyper-focused on one thing, we're kind of stuck in a narrow way of thinking. But when we let our minds wander, we're opening ourselves up to a whole range of possibilities.
This is really fascinating. So it's not just about daydreaming. It's about actively engaging in activities that allow our minds to wander in a productive way.
Right. Like, think about those times when you have your best ideas. It's often when you're doing something that doesn't require a lot of mental effort, like taking a shower or going for a walk or even just doing the dishes.
Yeah, I definitely have those moments of inspiration when I'm doing mundane tasks. I never realized there was a scientific explanation for it.
There is. It's all about giving our brains the space they need to make those creative connections.
This is all so interesting, but I have to admit, it's a little daunting to think about actually implementing these changes.
Hmm.
Like, I know I should be embracing boredom and practicing scatter focus, but with all the demands of modern life, it's hard to know where to even start.
Well, one of the authors actually suggests a 2-week challenge to reset your mind and reclaim your focus.
A 2-week challenge, that sounds manageable. Tell me more.
It involves 3 key components:
Right.
limiting screen time, disconnecting regularly, and rediscovering boredom.
Okay, so let's break that down. First, limiting screen time. Any tips on how to actually do that?
I think the first step is to be honest with yourself about how much time you're actually spending on screens.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Maybe even keep track for a few days just to get a baseline. Then you can start setting some realistic goals for yourself and utilize the features on your phone that track and limit your app usage.
Oh, yeah, I completely forgot about those. I should definitely start using those.
And instead of constantly checking your phone, maybe allocate specific times for checking emails and social media.
That's a great idea. It's about setting boundaries.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your technology use instead of letting it control you.
Okay, what about disconnecting regularly? How do we do that in a world that's constantly connected?
Well, it could be as simple as turning off the internet in the evenings
Oh, that's a good one.
or instituting a tech-free day once a week, even if it's just for a few hours. You could also try leaving your phone in another room while you're working or spending time with loved ones.
I love that. It's about creating those pockets of time where we can truly disconnect and be present in the moment.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about rediscovering boredom? That one feels a little trickier to me. Like, how do we actually embrace boredom when we're so used to being constantly entertained and stimulated?
It really is about shifting your mindset. Instead of viewing boredom as something to avoid, try to see it as an opportunity for your mind to wander and explore.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. So instead of reaching for my phone every time I have a spare moment, I should just sit with the boredom.
Exactly. Or take a walk without listening to a podcast, or just let your mind wander while you're doing the dishes.
So basically, embrace those moments of quiet and stillness.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all really insightful, but I think it's important to address the why behind all of this. Like, why should we care about reclaiming our focus?
Because it impacts our entire experience of life.
That's a big statement. How so?
Well, think about it. When we're constantly distracted and overstimulated, life feels chaotic and overwhelming.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
But when we learn to calm the noise and reclaim our focus, we gain clarity and a sense of control over our lives.
It's like we're taking back the reins, right? Instead of being pulled in a million different directions, we're choosing where to direct our attention.
Exactly. And that can have a profound impact on our well-being, our creativity, our relationships, everything.
So it's not just about productivity, it's about improving the quality of our lives in every aspect.
Precisely.
Wow, this has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. It's amazing how something as simple as embracing boredom and allowing our minds to wander can have such a profound impact on our focus and creativity.
It is pretty incredible, isn't it?
It is. So what's like one small thing our listeners could do today to start incorporating these ideas into their lives?
Well, I think the easiest place to start is with the screen time.
Yeah.
Maybe just choose one app that you tend to get sucked into
Yeah.
and set a time limit for yourself. Or, maybe try turning off notifications for a few hours each day.
That's a good one. I'm definitely going to try that.
And just see how it feels. You might be surprised at how much calmer and more focused you feel.
I'm excited to give it a try. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into reclaiming your focus. It's been a fascinating conversation,
Yeah, it has.
and we hope you found it helpful and insightful. If you're looking for more practical wisdom inspiration on how to live a more fulfilling life, be sure to visit us at concentratedwisdom.com.
That's right.
We've got tons of resources there, including articles, videos, and even a free guide on how to create your own personalized growth plan.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive. Bye.
This is the Concentrated Wisdom Podcast signing off. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and don't forget to share the wisdom with someone who needs it.